week 7 already. I can't believe it. So
Mhm.
we have completed 42 Native Wellness Power Hours. And if you're just learning or just joining us, you can go back to the Native Wellness Institute's Facebook page and view them. You can go to our website. You can go to our YouTube channel and check them out. And so today we're beginning our week 7. And since Tuesday is National Awareness Day for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, our whole week, starting from today through Friday, will all be about missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so we welcome you here today. The Native Wellness Institute, we're a national nonprofit organization. We like to say that we're a social profit organization because the work that we do benefits our people. And we're celebrating our 20th year. So, what a year to celebrate our anniversary during a pandemic. And we're usually out in the community doing our work. And because of the pandemic, we switched up real fast and we brought our work online. And so, the Native Wellness Power Hours are our response to the pandemic, and it's our way to bring healing and wellness to the hearts and the homes of people out there that are wanting to get more information. And so they're just meant to provide teachings and uplifting messages, resources, a smile, a laugh, just to bring some healing during this pandemic time. And today, I'm super excited for our guest. So she is a mentor. She's an amazing woman who is the author of a book called Transformation Beyond Greed, Native Self-Actualization. And I'm going to put it up right here.
Mhm.
She'll share a little bit later about where we can get this book, but it's a really, really awesome book. And as we all work to learn more about ourselves and our people and the way we think and why, like this is a really, really good resource. And she'll share a little bit more. So in our own homes, let's put our hands together or raise our hands or let's give a big lily to Dr. Sidney Stone Brown. Welcome, Sidney.
Hello. Okay. Good to see you. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor
Yeah.
to speak with you and with your audience.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you here. And if you notice, Sidney and I both are wearing our earrings,
Yep.
our MMIW earrings, as we bring awareness to this week. So, Sidney, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I grew up on the Blackfeet Reservation, the northeast corner on Milk River, about 5 miles from Del Bonita, if people know where that is. And my father's is Blackfeet. My mother was Canadian she was born in Red Deer. So I have a colonist and I have a Blackfoot in my family. And part of who I am and what I'm about is trying to make sense of all that. And of course, I want to honor my mom because she came down from Canada to live with my great grandma and her auntie and uncle, John Wren and Beth Wren. Um, and she was around my great grandma and learned a lot.
Mm,
So she was a person that was not native, but she had a great deal of knowledge and honoring of our ways. And uh, when she married my dad, her side of the family was very upset that she would want to marry an Indian.
mm,
So you get all that craziness stirred up inside. What the heck is this all about? And you're just a little kid. That's mom, that's dad. What are they? What? And you hear the stories, right?
yeah.
So for me, moving off the reservation during the termination era, which my dad chose to do,
Mm,
um, because he was sure that the population of the tribe was going to vote for termination. He didn't want it. His mother didn't want it, but some people did. And so he said, "No, I have to prepare you to live in this world,
mm,
and I want you to get an education and be sure and help your people."
mm.
So here I am being
That's
uh, raised for my teen years, and middle school years off the reservation. So you have the grounding and culture, language around you, and land base, and then you're in a foreign land. That's what it felt like to me.
Mhm.
And I was in a Catholic school and that first year off the res, and oh my goodness, I got an ornery nun. I'll tell you. And my brother got this beautiful nun as a teacher who helped him with math, and he went on because of her to be able to study and become an engineer.
Wow.
So I spent time trying to get through what I call my trauma, um, and making sense of all that.
Uh,
So by the time I was in my 30s, my mom wanted me to get confirmed in the Catholic Church. And so I prayed about it and thought about it. I'd already been on Vision Quest, I'd been to Sundance, been to ceremonies. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do that. That seems like something I need to do. So I picked a name and I chose Mary Magdalene. My poor mother about fainted. Why would you choose that name? And I said, well, think about it, Mom. She's the first person that saw Christ.
uh,
And my mom goes, oh, now, of course, we know that Mary Magdalene was not a prostitute.
yeah.
She wasn't a fallen woman. She was an apostle. And she was the first to see Christ. So I honor my mom in that way of saying these are important teachings too.
Mhm.
But my heart is I want to increase my knowledge of our language, and I received a name a couple years ago that had begun to already shape my life. Translated, it means protector of the circle, and I understand it. Every year, I learn more about what that means.
Mhm.
So I'm very appreciative that Peter gave me that name and was one of my teachers after I wrote the book. And he said that book represents this name that you're work that you've already begun this work and you've been doing this all these years. So I weave back and forth between modern and traditional.
Mhm.
And when I told the elders I wanted to get a doctorate in clinical psychology, it was like, you want to do what? Okay. And I thought about it, I prayed about it. And the honest thing happened. Uh, I'll go back to when I was just young, and I went home to work for a year, and my dad says, go see your great uncle. So I did. I went out to my uncle's house, and he said, this kid needs to get out of here. He said, take him to a movie. I said, oh, all right. So I hauled this young 14-year-old to the theater and we saw Soldier Blue. Oh my gosh, I had never seen a movie quite like that told some of the truth. And we went and ate afterwards, and I said, you're no cowboy. What are you doing trying to act like a cowboy? You're an Indian. Why don't you know who you are, what your story is, where we come from? Don't you know about Grandma Ren? Don't you know about your side of the family? And so he had to think about all that. And I drove away thinking that guy probably thinks I'm some kind of nut, the way I talk to him. Well, when I was 50 years old, he applied for a job where I worked. And I was on the panel and I said, I can't, I think this is a relative. I'm not going to be on this panel. No, no, Sid, we need you on that panel. I go, okay. So I walked up to him after the interview and I said, Joe, I think we're related. And he said, of course we're related. I never forgot you.
Uh,
He's a psychologist, and he goes, you got to get back to school. You got to get your doctorate. We need you to do this work. And he knew my model and my research that I had wanted to do. So long story short, that's how I went back to school for my doctorate at 55. And Joe was pushing me from behind to keep going and to finish. So I graduated at 60.
uh,
And by the way, he now is working with the Maori people, and he's in New Zealand. So I just saw him this last fall.
oh, awesome. Awesome. Yeah. a funny story. When we were in New Zealand for the Healing Our Spirit Worldwide conference, we were driving around one day and we drove by this house, and it had like this like a North American native design like outside the door, and we're like, I wonder if Joe lives there. Like we pulled over and went knocking on the door. Nobody was home.
Oh, you found him? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
we didn't find him. We just thought maybe that was his house, but it wasn't. Oh, it was funny. Anyway, so looking at your book, what motivated you to write this topic, and what is the book about?
Well, the book actually is all the things I couldn't use and didn't use in my dissertation. And I would find things and I would show my dissertation chair and she would say, put it aside, you'll use it later. Well, I never dreamed it would be a book.
Oh,
So when I was working on an assessment tool for Native Americans as part of my dissertation, I sent out questions in 4 worldviews to 22 psychologists, and 12 of them did the work I asked them to do to determine if any of these uh, distinguish from one worldview to another. And uh, when I got it back and I started looking at some of the outcomes, we had 18 questions that had high reliability to place people in a modern world or a traditional worldview. And so I asked my dissertation chair, Kathleen Gathercall at George Fox University, could I weave in the things that I was learning from the elders? And she said, sure, we'll find a way to help you with that. Well, that's actually what mostly ended up in the book. So I went to Canada, and this is an example. Joe couldn't get up there, so he had made an agreement, and he said, you go. And I said, well, all right. So I went to Sissica Reserve, and I presented my model of the native self-actualization. And down in the audience, people started calling me and saying, that came from here. That came from here. And it's a circle.
mhm.
And I'm going, yeah, I dreamed it. And they said, oh, we've been looking for you.
Wow.
And they told me they wanted me to write the book. So that's how that book got going. The research that is in the book and the interviews with the elders and the teachings that they gave me. So actually, these things they can't be coincidences. Um, you couldn't wish them. They just happen. So I think of it how I live my life is I just try to go with the flow.
Mhm.
And I pray before I do anything, and I ask for direction and guidance. Even like this this morning, I'm praying, going, "Okay, what am I supposed to say? Yeah, what 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 are you using me for today? You know,
Yeah.
it's like I'm glad I woke up. Huh? You know, this is a good thing. I can be grateful I woke up, and also that we can have joy in our life. I know these are troubled and difficult times. I understand what we're going through, big changes. If we can pull joy into our life, then we will have a grounding that gives us courage to take on what do we need to do today.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful for my recovery. I've been in recovery since May 10th, 1972. I stopped drinking.
Wow.
And so what I used to be like, what happened, and what I'm like now are quite different, by the way. But I've lived to 73. I'm in a hot spot. I live in a hot spot. I work in a hot spot. And people around me are devastated by this virus.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have a name that labels it like the Spanish flu. No, it's a virus. They don't have names. They We have no immunity in the world against this virus, and our task is to uh, change our lives. I mean, only this earth being we call Mother Earth, is the one that could stop us all in our tracks, slow us down, and tell us to take a good, hard look at our lives. So, one of the things that really shaped my life was when I was in college. I went from Portland State down to visit, and there was a speaker at the University of Willamette University in Salem. And I never heard of this person before. His name was Thomas Binyaka.
Mm,
And I knew he was Hopi. That's all I knew.
mhm,
And when he spoke to us, he said some things that resonated for me and changed my life.
mm,
He said, first of all, wherever you go, no matter where you are, let people know what tribe you are.
mm,
And so from that day forward, I always wear jewelry. I'll wear a beret. I'll wear something so that people know.
mm.
When I work in non-native setting, they go, "You have the most interesting jewelry." What is that exactly? Uh, so you learn to be a mentor, a teacher to people because they're pitiful and they don't know the history of this country.
Mhm.
They don't know what happened to us. They don't know how that affected our families and our lives.
Mm.
And uh, I don't want to say ignorant, but I'm comfortable with pity that they are just sorrowful.
Yeah.
And what I've found is if you form relationship, if you talk to people, if you listen to people, um, then you understand how they frame their ideas and their beliefs. And I think sometimes when people post things that to me would be ignorant, you just don't know any better. Um, I, they've not been told.
Yeah.
They didn't get that information. So how could we expect anything different?
Yeah.
So it reminds me when I see some Facebook posts, it reminds me that that's the way some people see the world. And I don't want to forget that. I want to reach out and try to educate and try to pass on knowledge, and then they'll decide what they're going to do with it. I can't change other people. I can only change me. And that's the truth.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I already want to rewatch this because I want to take notes, and I don't want to take notes while I'm listening to you. So it's just beautiful teaching. So in your book, I've read your book and I have referenced it many times. And in the back of the book are some actual field notes from Maslow. And so one of my questions I wanted to ask you was, what were some of your like profound teachings or highlights that you recall from this whole process of putting this book together?
Well, I write about it in the book, but when I was up in Alaska doing a presentation on Native self-actualization, which is what I called my model at the time, a young man came up to me and he said, "You know, I'm a relative of Maslow." And he said, "I think he would really like to see what you've done." But he had already passed by then. And he said he would have liked your work. "Did you know that he worked with the Blackfoot people in Canada?" And I said, "No, I didn't know that." And this would have been in the 80s. So that was kind of in the back of my mind. What does that mean? What's that about? So when I started my dissertation, one of the things that I wanted to do is to go to the archives of psychology in Akron, Ohio, which happens to be where AA also started. I thought that was interesting. And I'm going to Akron, Ohio, and my husband's with me, and he's my photographer. He's taking pictures of all these documents and helping me. And I had written to Anna, who is a Maslow's surviving daughter, and asked if I could look to see if there's anything that has to do with the Blackfoot people in the archives. And she indirectly gave a permission for me to be there and to look. So when I got to the archives, my husband, well, 6 foot and I'm 5'2", and we walk in the door and I say, "We're here to, did you hear from Anna Maslow?" And he turns to my husband, because it's got to be a guy, right? He turns to my husband and he said, "Anna contacted us and said you could get into her box at her seal." And my husband says, "That's Sidney," pointing at me. Because with my name, people
Yeah.
sometimes automatically assume I'm a guy.
Mm.
Well, there's an example of what it is to be a woman. It's got to be a guy. It can't be a girl, you know, kind of thing. And so we looked through those boxes for 2 weeks, and I found that paper that you see in the back of the book, and there's two versions of it that he had never published. And it explains his view of the Blackfoot people in 1938.
Mm,
And this is before alcohol was prevalent
mhm,
and when the culture was very much intact.
mhm,
And what happened is he was only there 6 weeks. That's what astounded me. I thought months or a
mm,
long time or went back again. Nope, 6 weeks. And in those 6 weeks, he changed. That's the beginning of the title of the book, Transformation. He went up there a behaviorist, and by the time he formulated who he was and how he wanted to work, he was a humanist. And that's where he came up with the hierarchy of needs, because he was studying secure and insecure and trying to figure that all out. Well, when he met the Blackfoot people, he said he'd never seen a society that most everyone was secure. There's generosity, there's kindness. That's our leadership, that's our teaching of how to be a good human being. And he couldn't get over it.
mm,
And so he said, these modern ways that we use in psychology aren't going to work with these people because they don't have the same
mm.
defense mechanisms. They're different than the dominant society. So I really think what this book is about is beginning that transformation for indigenous people to reacculturate, inculturate, and also attach to their own cultural group, but also for the world to understand everyone was indigenous at some point in time. Everyone. And if you understand colonization, if you understand world dominance and empires and all of that, then you begin to see, oh no, this is not how we were meant to live.
Yes, yes.
So the elders really wanted the record set straight. They said, no, we want people to understand what he learned here. He didn't display it in the way we taught him.
Mm, mm.
So in the book, we always see the hierarchy of need, and most
Yeah,
people who have taken a psychology class know what that is.
yes,
It's always in the form of a pyramid.
yes.
What's the chances of Sissica elders teaching Maslow with a pyramid? Not likely. So they get a big kick out of this. They said, no, no, it was a teepee.
Mm,
Now think about 1940, 1950. How could Maslow come forward and say, "Oh, I learned these things from a secure nation who do not want to assimilate, who don't want to be like us, and this is how they do it." So he moved it around to become what we now know as a hierarchy. But I also learned that that was because he was doing major work with corporations in America and later other countries, and they wanted it in a pyramid. Does that make sense to you? Now, what is it really? I think of it as an inverted teepee. That's what it's about. We come from the spirit world
nice.
and we're welcomed
Yes,
and we're wanted
yes,
and we're valued. And there's the secure
yes.
beginning that process. And then in that being welcomed,
I don't know if
we're
you can see this.
protected.
Yes,
So I tell the kids and folks I work with, they say, well, what would I be protecting you from? First thing that comes out of most of our treatment population is gangs. Yeah, you got a clue. And those grandmas and those grandpas would be saying, oh, you're not going to do that.
yeah.
And so we called it strict, right? But they were really protecting us. And then we're brought into our societies, and tribes have different ways of saying this, clans, societies, whatever you call it. That's where you fit and belong, and you have responsibility, and you're taught that. And then in our tribe, what is most important teaching is altruism,
Mm,
that we give back.
mhm,
And it's not expecting something in return. And in that process of giving back, altruism, we actualize within the group. So, why did I choose self actualization? Because I wanted people to make that connection between Maslow and the Blackfoot teachings. but it's really native actualization. And if we're all indigenous, and no, that doesn't mean everybody gets to join the tribe.
Yeah.
That means go back and find your own roots, find out who you are, where you came from, and then look at the history of your people, and you'll find your village, you'll find your land base, and you'll find your relatives. So when I was in Australia this last fall, and I walked in and I looked at the group, and there were just a handful of Indigenous people out of all that were there. And I said, why? Why, if this is an Indigenous conference,
Mm.
where are the Indigenous people? And let's talk about color. That's racism.
Yeah.
That, oh no, we only choose lighter people to be educated. We only choose um, women because men are too threatening.
Mm.
We don't want to educate those Indian men, right? So what I'm saying is we all need to find our center. We need to find what it is our purpose and why we were brought to this earth.
Mhm.
And we made a promise before we ever got here that we were going to do this thing and see it through and help the people. And that's what, to me, the Native Wellness Institute is about, is you're out there frontline helping as many people as you possibly can. And I'm just proud to be affiliated and support and help you guys in any way I can.
Oh,
It's beautiful.
thank you. Thank you. Gosh, just everything you say is just resonating, and it's so perfect for this time. It makes me think, um, I wish we could send this to like every member of Congress and including number 45, but that's a whole nother workshop. Um, you mentioned your assessment, and for those that might be watching, that might be working in tribal or urban Native organizations doing behavioral health work or doing community engagement and outreach, can you just share a little bit about that assessment tool?
Oh, the first chapter of the book describes four different worldviews from very traditional to very modern, and that the assimilation process and the termination era and the relocation process within the tribal policies in this country, and it also happened up in Canada, is that people would block further assimilation. They would block uh, returning home, and so I am an urban Indian going home, and the first thing I noticed that year when I went home is they said, "Are you the Vista worker?" No, no, I'm not the Vista worker. Who's the Vista worker? But I went home because I was looking for myself. I went home to try to make sense of some of this. And when I was in college, I hung out with Hawaiians. And man, they drink like Indians, I'll tell you that. Uh, and I hear their stories, and it sounds like us. And then I hear their spirit stories, it sounds like us. And we just got along really well and understood each other. And then I looked at the racism in this country because I had friends who were Asian, and there were very few Indian people in my college when I was there in my university. And at Portland State, when I was there my third and fourth year for my bachelor's degree, um, I remember there were 6 Indian students out of 25,000,
Wow.
and yet we found each other.
Yeah.
And some of us are still friends. Denise Lajmader to me is a treasure, and she's a beautiful teacher, and she's an author, and she was one of those 6. And
Mm.
we have so many people in the Portland area that helped and cared about each other and supported each other. And you had John Spence on a while back, and John was a master degree Purdue graduate, and he was so smart. And I remember meeting him, and then he was just regular, and I thought, man, You mean you can have a master's degree and still be Indian? Because the only master's degree native people I met were so assimilated and they wanted nothing to do with Indians. And I thought, holy cow, I don't want one of those degrees if that's what happens to you. So, anyway, John to me is a treasure because he's just who he is. And I've had wonderful teachers and mentors, and I write about it in the book. So, anyway, that assimilation process is what got the assessment tool going. And we started using it in the late 70s and early 80s. We were one of the first programs in the United States to do talking circle. And we were sending people to sweat lodge, and all kinds of things were going on that was just out of the ordinary. And yet, because of the support of other people, we were able to break through some of those barriers. And this is before the Freedom of Religion Act was passed, and before the ICWA law was passed, or the Indian Child Welfare Act, to protect our children so they aren't further removed from our families. But the assessment tool looks at 8 areas of one's life. And the first 4 we used in those early days. How do you believe in a power greater than yourself? How do you want to spend your free time? Who do you want to learn from? And how do you define family? And what we found is a vast difference between traditional and modern as we ask those questions. And that's what started formulating the model. And then when I went back for my dissertation, I added 4 more. Yes, I could have added more, but I wanted to graduate. I'd still be in school if I had. The next one we added was time. There's a difference in time conception and relationship. Time for the modern world is linear. In the traditional world, it's circular. And it's just a different orientation. No, I've never heard anybody turn to somebody else in a ceremony and say, "What time is it? When is this going to be over? When will we eat?" No. it You get there, you belong, you fit, you participate, and then you eventually is over. But it's not over because somebody says, "Oh, time's up." And I look at the clock and I go, 1:33. Okay, we only got how many more minutes? Huh? See, that's linear time.
Yes.
The other thing we added was language, because we know 80% of the culture is transmitted and transferred with language. And so for those of us, and I'm one of them, that has only a handful of words, and I listen, but because I have major hearing loss, I also hope I heard it correctly. What happens is we can only understand so much. So I think of it as like being a 3rd grader or 5th grader. And here I have a doctorate. No, I'm just learning. And that's a process throughout our lives. So language is important. The other thing we wanted to look at was cultural attachment. There are some people that just say, "I have none." And maybe they know they were adopted and they know that they were removed in foster care, but they don't know where their people are. And I've met people who don't even know what tribe they are,
Yes.
but they've heard they're Indian. Maybe they're Alaska Native, but they don't know. They're not sure. And then the last one that we looked at was food, and how interesting that we're now circling to really stop and take a look at our food supply and our food chain and what this is all about because of this pandemic. And so it's important for us to see those 8 areas of our lives and the life choices that we make. And I never say one is right or wrong. I say they're different. And in making different choices, you have free choice. When I talk about the termination era and the relocation era, we had no choice. It was pushed on us and we had no choice. So now we're at a different place in our lives and we do have choice. We can have spiritual grounding. I sat with someone not too long ago that said, I read chapter 2, and I said, okay. And she said, I can choose either one, huh? I can either be traditional or modern, right? Yeah. And she goes, and I can be both. I said, yes, you can be both. Oh my gosh, her eyes got really big, and it, like, holy, I thought I had to choose. See,
Uh,
that's still that intergenerational trauma.
yes, yes.
My dad knew the language and he could speak it, but he never taught us.
Mm,
And so when I started getting really involved in the Indian movement, and these are pre-AIM days,
mm,
post-AIM days, my dad was worried for my safety, by the way, and picketing and demonstrating and all the things we were doing back in the 70s. But he said, I'm so proud of you because you care and you're showing us that you care by what you're doing. And then when my daughter was born, she, of course, wanted to learn the language. She wanted to know words. And this is what I noticed with my dad is he'd say the words, but he quickly changed the subject.
mm.
What the heck is that about? But when he was in his 70s and 80s, he started speaking our language, not halting, not holding back. So, this is my prayer that whatever ties our tongue, whatever stops us from knowing these things, please open our ears, open our tongue so that it can speak the language, because that's intergenerational trauma and we have to move it for well-being of people. So that assessment tool now has 18 questions.
Mhm.
It can be done in about 5 to 10 minutes. The child version, there has to be an adult assist because they draw and they tell stories as part of their assessment. And then out of that, you get a picture of where people are in these 8 areas of one's life. So we ran the numbers. This is postdoc, and I didn't get a grant. I pay out of pocket to do my research. Um, my dissertation chair, who's been my mentor, her mouth fell open and I went, oh. You get that scared feeling like, oh, I don't want to hear this. And she's looking at the data. This is 709 Native Americans across the United States and Canada, one in Hawaii and one in Guam. So here's all Native participants. And she ran the numbers and she said, Sid, this is better than some of the best assessment tools in our field.
Wow.
It was 0.87. And she said, some of the best are like zero point 0.8.
Mm,
And she said, I really want you to know you're right where you need to be and even better. I go, okay. And then we did norming in terms of, does this measure native things? Is it a native instrument? So they administered it to George Fox, and people know that university is a Quaker university, and there's a lot of non-native there,
mm,
and um, all Christian undergrad students. So they administered to it, and you know what this instrument can do? It can figure out if you're native or non-native.
mm.
So it's reliable, it's valid, and it works. Now, I work with the Navajo Nation,
Mhm.
and I'm a behavioral health director in the northern region. There's 3 of us, and I'm in the northern region. And I'm just so honored to be a part of helping with that tribe and what they're going through and assisting. And we're putting this instrument into some of our work with some of our clients, and they're just hungry. They want this information. So I tell them this is how it works. Right now, you've got the generic term of these questions for all Native people. We're going to Navajoize this. That means I'm going to get experts who speak the language and who will assist me. And I'm going to have them make these questions fit really well for Native people. And then we'll administer, run the numbers, and find out what we get. Well, Calvin White, who is an educator, Navajo, well-known researcher, he got a hold of my book when I gifted it to him for being part of my dissertation, mentoring me. And he goes up to Northern Medical and he takes the book and he goes, how many of you have seen this book? This book needs to be read by everybody in Indian House Service. I go, gee, there's the word out.
Excellent.
But this is my vision. I want people to understand. This is not about money.
Mhm.
This is not about power or control or anything. What I want them to understand is the work that I'm doing, once we get it individually adapted for a specific language group, it will belong to that tribe and they will protect it. And I'll be long gone, folks, but they will have it to be able to use in the future. There's my vision.
Uh,
And I
Beautiful.
have a daughter who has done some marvelous training and research, and I know she will protect the generic version.
Mhm.
And I want it out there in the world. So my plan is, and of course the pandemic slowed all this down. My plan was to go to the IRB for the Navajo Nation, present the information to them,
Mhm.
set up the expert panel, and then have them Navajoize it, and then us using it, and then it's up to them from there what they do. But each of the chapters in the book will have a workbook that will go with that chapter to assist people to understand how to use this in Indian country.
Ex-
So educational setting as well as therapy.
Yeah, excellent. So we have a few people asking questions about what is the name of the book and how we can get it. So we have Transformation Beyond Greed, Native Self-Actualization by Sidney Stone Brown. So where can people get a copy of the book?
You can go to the bookpatch.com. It is I self-published and it's available through them. And they'll just ship it directly to you and charge you shipping and handling. If you want to do bulk purchase, I can help by going in and purchasing through the agreement we come to, and I can get a number of books out to you. Okay. Um,
Excellent.
so thebookpatch.com or directly contact me. And I have now a website that's just getting up and running. I don't know that it's completed yet, but you can get in there. It is the first part of the book title, Transformation Beyond Greed
Okay,
dot
excellent.
com.
Okay,
Yeah, dot com.
transformationbeyondgreed.com. So you can get more
Yeah.
information there. Is your assessment tool available on your website as well for people that are interested?
Almost, almost.
Almost.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, so it'll be like a pilot study for whatever setting it's in. I'll set up a portal for individuals to go in. And I have, right now have my son-in-law, who is Cherokee, and his brother working on a platform to be able to assess the outcome of the instrument. Right, you just go into the portal, take the test like you would like a survey and monkey survey, but it would also score it for you.
Okay.
And then of course hand scoring would be something I would teach psychologists and other folks to do.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So also in the book, there's many diagrams and things like that. I showed this one earlier. And there's a couple of other diagrams that Sydney, oh, there's another diagram. She's gonna send it to me and I'm gonna put it on our Facebook page. So if you want to check back like in the next day or so, we'll have the link and we'll have more information about the book, and then we'll have some of her diagrams that she changed since the book, things that she likes better. So
Well, if you know what an editor is like, they have an idea of how things should be, and you have an idea. The reason I self-published is because if you're with a big uh, publishing company, they take control. They have the copyright and they tell you what you can and can't do.
mhm.
By self publishing, I kept control and being able to determine what that looked like. So that page, I wish I could go back and change. I might one of these days, by the way, edit it. But I want you to see chapter 3 as helping you understand, and I'll put it in a perspective of a Navajo medicine man who I worked with. Anderson Hosky said, Sid, this chapter is describing the enemy way and the beauty way.
Uh,
And he helped me. So the enemy way is contrary, it goes opposite, it goes backwards. And so if you think about it, people who cause chaos will never admit they're the source of chaos, right?
Yeah.
And they'll define reality. Well, the reason this is the way it is because of this or that. And then they make a suggestion that there's something you're to do in order for this to be taken care of. And then they expect compliance. And what does that feed? Power and control. So there was this man who went down to a tribe, went down to the state of Texas and passed a law against casinos, any gambling in the state. Do anybody remember this story? And then he went to the tribe and he said, "Oh, so sorry that this happened to you. Oh, this isn't fair. Let me help you. Let me take your money.
Yeah.
Let me help you. And we'll sort this out." That's the enemy way. Now, what you can do, whether you be an individual in a domestic violence situation, if you're in a psychologically abusive situation, if you are being trafficked, you can stop and say, wait a minute, what's going on here? So the first step when you see that chaos is ask yourself, okay, who's the source of this chaos? Because it wasn't always there. Okay, if I can identify the source, then I can define my own reality. Oh no, it's this way. Not what I see. You see the wisdom of our elders? That's not what we see, right? And then we get to do what we had laws passed for, self-determination. This is sovereignty of nation. And then out of that comes an empowerment of the nation, but an empowerment for the individual.
Yeah.
And I think it restores dignity. And that's how we intervene against the trafficking that is hurting so many and are missing and the murdered. Anything we can do to turn it around.
Definitely. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Well, that was the last question I wanted to get to and kind of shift. So, one of your daughters, I've known for decades, and her and I are working together actually with some local efforts, bringing awareness to the MMIW movement. And our activities actually start tomorrow, and we have several virtual things going on all week. So, I want to give a shout out to Laura John, who is the tribal liaison for the city of Portland, and she does amazing work. So I know you're super proud of her, and I know she's super proud of you too.
Mhm.
So we just wanted to take a look at the intersection between Native self-actualization and MMIW. So can you just share some of your thoughts and wisdom around that?
Well, I asked the elders in Sissica, and Clement Bear Chief was one of my informants for those questions. And I said, are we a matriarchal society? And he said, no, they got it all wrong. He said, I don't know why they say that, because we honor women. And women have an important role and responsibility, as do the men. And so we're even. That's not high or low. It is that you all make a contribution. So this idea of hierarchy of men over women is so contrary to indigenous worldview. And I think that when we flip that paradigm of thinking away from hierarchy and start thinking about how we are all even, we all make a contribution. And I've, in my years of working, it's like, who are you to be doing what you're doing? You're just a girl, or you're just a woman. Yeah, no, and my gender isn't going to change. I am who I am. Uh, my brother used to say, I don't know how you could have such a loud voice and be such a little person. And I learned to get past my anger and try to use that knowledge in a good way. And I want to honor my oldest granddaughter for what she's done. She got a law passed and helped with the law putting our history into the curriculum of high schools in the state of Oregon. So Lorraine, Grandma loves you, and I'm so proud of you to think that at your age you're already making those changes. And I did take her to Australia with me, and she did an amazing job presenting down there, because they need that in their curriculum too.
Yeah.
So I think when we start honoring women, and our men have to heal, because in order to feel powerful, they've taken on this enemy way. And that's where the domestic violence and the harm towards women and children. And it was contrary to our world that someone would sexually molest a child, verbally abuse a child, that someone would do harm to a child. The whole part of that process of protecting the child is, we can't let this happen. And I remember asking an Athabascan chief up in Alaska when I did some work up there in the 80s. And he said, it was an aberration within our people if someone behaved this way. And we would take them out and we would re educate them to their role and responsibility as a man and how to be a relative. And he said, if they wouldn't change, we kill them.
Mm.
So he said, no, we don't do that in this day and age. But he said, this is how serious it is, because one of these individuals can ruin a village. So when people make light of these things and think it's no big deal, it is. And I've gone and volunteered at our gatherings down in this area, and I offer NADA, which is AccuDetox, which is seeds in the ear and 5 points in the ear to help people calm down, because after they tell their story, they just shake. And we need to know that we know how to be in a regular state and not that traumatized state. So I very much use NADA as part of our intervention treatment with people that we work with.
Nice.
It's also self-care for the staff when they need it, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, there was just like so much there. It's like I can't wait to rewatch this to just to soak it in all again. So you mentioned earlier that you're in a hot spot. You're working for the Navajo Nation, the Dene people. What sorts of things are you doing for your self-care and your self-regulation, given this, historic time that we're in?
I think of the Hopi prophecy I heard from Thomas Binyaka in the formative years. And when I heard these stories back then, it made no sense to me. I heard from the Lakota elders, they'll be selling water. That was so absurd. They're going to do what? And guess what? I buy water. But anyway, what is the Hopi teachings? That there is going to come a day when we have a choice between greed and living in harmony and living in a caring way and loving way with each other in the world that we live in, that we're to help each other and care about each other, and to live in a natural way. And so much of this is so unnatural. So I think of them saying, this, when this day comes, the river will be flowing fast. And the tendency is that we want to hang on to the bank and grasp for what we have always known and just let go. Let go and let the river flow and let it carry you. Go to the middle of the river and let it carry you. The river knows where it's going. Trust it, and you'll be all right. And that we will have our own gardens, that we will be villages again, and that we will care for each other. That is the spiritual change that's going on in this country right now. And it's up to us to help do our little part. So being grounded, this was forecast long before any of us. And it will guide our children and our grandchildren and our great grandchildren long before we're a part of this. So I believe that this is a healing time. And I tend to listen to words, the Blackfoot language, and we never said Earth Mother. We said Earth Being. She's alive. And we need to help her. She's suffering. And who but this Earth Being could stop the world in the way that she has done? But she's telling us also to stop and know who we are, where we came from, and what we're really about. So I was talking to Theta this morning, and I said, one of the clients came to see me, and I said, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you trust me? And he goes, 3. I go, okay, we'll start there. Here's motivational interviewing. All right, we'll start there. And about 3 sessions later, I said, how we doing? I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I? And he goes, 10. I said, why 10? How did I get to 10? I was 3. And he said, quiet, thoughtful, reflective. He said, because you're real. And that's what people want. They want real,
Yeah.
not that protected, phony, fake stuff, but the real stuff. And if we can be genuine and real with each other, then we have a chance to heal. That's my daily life.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm sitting here feeling like I'm visiting with my grandma. So it, yeah.
Yeah, you know the Velveteen Rabbit story? When he said, you're real this morning, I said, oh, like the Velveteen Rabbit.
Yeah.
I got gray hair. I'm kind of tattered. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. This was beautiful, Sid. Earlier, you talked about when you went up to Siksika and your elders told you, we've been waiting for you. I think like that's really profound for today. It's like we've been waiting for you and we've been waiting for you to share your beautiful work and your book and the beautiful words that you shared today. And I think all of us, being in a state of quarantine and in this state of reflection, like your words today were just like really profound and really helpful. I know there's lots of beautiful comments that have been shared, so thank you so much, Sidney, for just the beautiful spirit that you are and for everything that you shared with us today. This Thank you so much. I'm grateful, and you made my day today too, so thank you. And as
Grab a hold of that joy. Keep that joy. Keep that humor. Um, Stay in balance. You asked how I do that.
Mhm.
My husband said he has one job description. He's retired. I said, what's that? He said, to make you laugh every day.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
So,
awesome.
men out there, if your women are strained, use your humor. It works.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome. Well, to our viewers out there, we want to thank you as well. And we want to thank the Noise Foundation and the National Indian Child Welfare Association for their support. And what I was realizing in your talk, I was so excited to start the interview with you. I didn't even interview myself. I didn't even introduce myself. um, my name is Jolene Joseph, and I'm the executive director of the Native Wellness Institute. And my Indian name is Doe, and I come from the Aani people from Fort Belknap, Montana, and I live here in Oregon with my family. And um, I'm just honored to be here and have this time with you. And I want to remind our viewers that starting today was our week 7, and then every day through Friday, our topic is going to be on MMIW. And tomorrow we have every Sunday we call it prayer songs from many nations. And tomorrow we have women from the West Coast to the East Coast up to Nunavut and Northwest Territories in Canada. Red Cody from the Navajo Nation is joining us, and many other singers, all women singers tomorrow are going to be on the Power Hour. Monday, we have representatives from the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. When we go on through the week, on Wednesday, we have a men's panel. So I'm glad you talked about men, and we have a men's panel on Wednesday that are going to be calling in men to join and take part in this movement. And we have just amazing speakers. We'll end up our week with hearing from young people, and what's their perspective on this movement. So please join in. 9 a.m. Hawaii time, 11 a.m. Alaska time, noon Pacific time, 1 Mountain, 2 Central, 3 Eastern, wherever else you are around the world. But thank you again, Sidney, and I hope you have an awesome weekend and a restful weekend as well. Thank you for the work that you're doing for the Navajo Nation. And thank you again for everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day and so on and so on. Thank you all.
Blessing.
Okay, take care.